Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, over here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk in glorious Midlothian, Scotland, the capital of the world, the capital of the universe, and every other universe that there could possibly be. I'm kidding, of course. Anyway, I hope everybody is doing well and has had a great week. I've been on vacation with my family because it's Valentine's and all of that, so we went up into St Andrews, where there's a lovely golf course that I think a certain American politician would like to get his hands on if he could. And we had a wonderful, lovely time together. But I'm back, and I'm back in the saddle and back ready to serve you with the best content that I can possibly come out with. And speaking of that, on tonight's show, we have a very special guest. It's not often that I have guests on my shows, but the new format for Songwriting Simplified going forward is going to be that I can't speak. Periodically, there, I said the word, periodically, I will have special guests on the show to help unpack certain issues and certain topics, of which I have some limited knowledge and some limited expertise, and these people have a lot more that they can bring to the party. So without further ado, you will know this person very well. He's one of my favorite Englishmen. And so without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Rich Cresswell.
Good evening.
Good evening, good sir. How are you?
Very well. How's everybody doing? Comments in the chat.
Yeah, tell us how your week and your day is going, folks, in the chat. That'd be awesome. We've got loads of people here. I think the first person in the door was Billy Morgan, and he was like nearly 3 hours ahead of time. And we have Radio Tuck from here. We have John Lake. We've got Kevin's Guitar Stories. We've got Paul Morgan. We've got Sean White, and we've got your good self, now known as Studio One Tuts. No reference, I take it there, to Tutankhamun or anything, right?
We've
got John Edgar here, and Carl Draduziak, and Mike Johnson from Music to Motion, and Bobby Booth. No show is complete without him being here, so now that he's here, we can get on with it. And we have United Effect here as well, who is in Montreal, Canada. So we've got two Canadians in here, which is a little concerning, to say the least. No, I love Canadians. I have Canadian relatives, so we're all good. Canada's a great place. All right, so let's get into the meat and veg of why I have Rich on the show here. We're going to be talking about composing and using sound libraries and basically working as a composer, working with sound libraries and making music for film, TV, games, all of that kind of stuff, which is the stuff that Rich does for a living, and he has a ton of experience that we can all draw upon. So
I hope so anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So how did you get started in composing for TV, film, and all of that, games and all of that kind of stuff?
Okay. Believe it or not, it's simply a matter of trading with people, which is something that we might touch upon a little bit in just a moment. But essentially, by offering to do something for somebody and for them to do something for me in return, And it was just through this trading of skills and abilities and talking to people that I was able to get my name passed around. Um, it really came about from um, doing sound design. So not traditional composing, not being in a band, or having fame and fortune beforehand, but simply being just good at one particular thing, where somebody needed to kind of fill that void with that particular skill that I had. I filled that void, and as a result, somebody else needed that void filled as well. And as I sort of progressed through helping people fill in their voids, learned a lot of knowledge from them, and also was involved in their circle of people as well. So kind of a pseudo networking, if you like.
Mm. And then people get to hear what you can do, and they get to hear the sound and the compositional style that you have and what you can bring. And I guess that's how it goes around.
Yeah, I think initially when I first started to come up with ideas about what I thought would be useful, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. There's lots of different styles. Um, we were chatting briefly just before the live stream here that, you've got people that want to be John Williams,
Yep.
people that want to be Hans Zimmer, people that want to do 8-bit music for handheld video games.
Yep.
And it really just depends on what you want to focus on. And it's really important to know early on what the focus is going to be, and really latch onto that. And it's okay to change your mind or bring in influences from other types of music. That makes you unique. Look at the music for, the Doom games, for example. Heavily influenced by rock and metal music, and it's not what you would think of as a traditional piece of game music. Certainly not Final Fantasy, is it? So
true. I mean, I've been listening recently to, I don't know if you follow a YouTube channel by a guy called Charles Cornell. You come across him?
Yeah, I've come across the guy. Yeah,
terrific piano player, and just all around good solid educator with music. And one of the things that he's been doing recently is kind of like been taking a bit of a deep dive into the world of Japanese video games and the music composed by some really terrific Japanese composers for games. And there's lots of different styles that you wouldn't expect, like from Japanese composers. They're deep into big band music, they're deep into Latin music, and some of those great Konami games have all got loads of that kind of thing going on, which is amazing. Yes. Music.
Some of the music from South Korea and Japan. I picked those two out specifically because they're doing so well at the moment.
Yeah.
And the quality of the music, as well as the musicianship as well, from even just pop artists, as well as people doing high level type music, is phenomenal. And the recording and the mixing and everything is really good right now from that neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So from your kind of early starts, kind of trading your skills for other things with other people in the business, how did you get kind of involved with using sound libraries, things like Contact and Serum and things like that? And how would you recommend people get started?
Yeah, so I got involved with Contact very, very, very early on because somebody told me that you could do scripting in it.
Okay.
And I was like, that sounds cool, I'll give that a go. And at first I was rubbish at it, didn't really know what I was doing. And then I came across a guy who goes under the pseudonym of Evil Dragon. He's very famous in the Contact arena regarding scripting and helps coach a lot of people along with scripting. Now he's done a lot of scripting for libraries like UJAM, for example, which you've mentioned before on videos. And I was interested in what he created. So I went and had a look, and I was like, oh my God, these are awesome. There's loads of them. Some of them are cheap, some of them are expensive, and, and there's different, rules. If you have a licensed library with Contact, then you need the Contact full version. If it's, if it's an independent one, you definitely need the Contact full version. Some offer the ability to, use them with the Contact players. Then I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm doing all this scripting and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep upgrading, and I'm going to keep going with Contacts, and I'm going to keep learning it. And as I was sort of requiring, all these sounds like strings and brass and different types of percussion instruments, I found myself using the tools that I already had.
Right.
I had this Contact software. So I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to use it, let's get some Contact libraries. I need strings, I need winds, I need brass, I need all these things. And then I discovered, all these different companies. Which one do I pick? It's like a kid in a sweet shop, right?
Yeah.
And the advice that was given to me, which is the same advice that I'd pass on to anybody, is don't go nuts. It's very easy to go, I'm going to get this plugin, I'm going to get that instrument, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. But it's actually more important to, have a lesser amount of instruments, a lesser amount of plugins, and know them really well. We talk about, Studio One and using the stock plugins.
Yeah.
And many of them, are very capable. And I have used them, in, commercial projects. Nobody knows. They don't need to know. What matters is the end result, right?
Absolutely. I mean, nobody, I think I said this earlier on Facebook, nobody, as far as we are aware, nobody ever went up to Shakespeare and asked him, what feather did he use to make his quills? And, what particular bird did he get his feathers from to make his quills, that he wrote all those great sonnets and poems and plays like Julius Caesar and Romeo and Juliet. Nobody asked him that. So why would anybody think to say, oh, what sound libraries did you use to make that awesome piece for that game or for that film? I mean, why would anybody say anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of people that I know, some of the moderators on the Facebook group for, Studio One support, that have used things like, PSO, for example, the Persona Symphony Orchestra, and created some really cool music. Now, it might not be what you would class as classical music. It's been used in a sort of a pop song, but still, it doesn't matter what you use, it's how you use it. And what I tend to find, and what I see people struggle with a lot, is thinking that a new plugin or a new library, a new set of sounds, or whatever, is going to, yield these amazing results for you, and you're going to be able to produce the music that you thought you wanted to produce. And actually, if you learn the tools that you have and how to squeeze out of them as much as you possibly can, then it might be time to reward yourself with something new.
Yeah. Yes, that's good.
In regards to, using these libraries and why it can be important to have, different types of libraries, depends also on what you aim to do as well. Again, we spoke briefly just before, about, if you wanted to do sort of like your super classical motion to picture, think of, your ETs and your Star Wars and,
Yeah.
Those types of films. If you wanted to do that sort of music, then it would be useful to get symphonic libraries and symphonic sounds under your belt, and these will take you a long time to learn, as well as having to learn,
Orchestration. Yeah.
yeah, how to learn how to. I mean, some people will pay to have their music written to sheet
Yeah.
for for live performances, if you're lucky enough to be able to afford to do that with your projects. And at that point, you should already know that you can afford it. So, but you've got to be good at understanding the relationships between the instruments and their voicings, and what instruments can do what, and the fact that again, we mentioned briefly earlier that when a horn section's playing a note and forming a chord, people do need to breathe.
Yeah.
Your guitarist cannot play at 240 BPM unless he's like from a metal band. There are limitations with real people
Yeah.
in terms of what they're able to do. And some of these libraries, sadly, do give you the ability to hold down a note almost indefinitely.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people will forget that the music and the individual notes and that sort of thing need to breathe. They need time, and it's your job to sort of learn a little bit. You don't need to know everything, but learn a little bit about each of the instruments that you're using. What does a bassoon actually sound like, and what does it sound like isolated? Have you ever gone and watched a video on YouTube, somebody playing just a bassoon solo? What does that sound like? And do that for all of the instruments and be familiar with them.
Definitely. I think learning the range of instruments is important. For sure. And also learning kind of within that range what's possible and what's not possible. Take saxophone, for example. There are certain intervals which are just really, really awkward because you're having to play certain key combinations, and it might be that you're having to press 4 down here and 2 here plus a side palm key to make one note, and then the next note, which is a 16th note later, is just going to be octave key and first finger. So getting between those two notes is awkward. So
Yeah.
I think learning some of those things, so doing a little bit of research about how instruments work, even if all you're doing really is you're just working with virtual instruments, you're working with a virtual orchestra. I think it's important to be able to do that so that you are able to write realistically for the instrumentation you're working with.
Absolutely, as well. And aside from learning theory, which obviously is covered on this channel quite a lot,
Yeah.
there's the software element of this as well. So obviously, I'll make a broad assumption here that most people watching this right now are using Studio One,
Mm-hmm.
and in most cases as their primary DAW. Now, there are things like sound variations that people are aware of, which are fantastic. These enable us to change articulations. So let's say, for example, your violins are playing spiccatos, that very short, very rhythmic style. And then they need to play like a longer note, a legato note. That's what we can use the sound variations for. But the thing with that is it's knowing when is the right time to do that, and does it need to be as repetitive as you've made it? Can you make little changes to it?
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be a super whiz with theory to realize that you've been playing the same 3 notes in a repetitive pattern for the last 16 bars. Maybe it's time to change something.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And then with all of that, I mean, I bang on about this quite a lot, but negative track delay is really important with libraries. If you're using them in Studio One, you really do need to make use of this feature.
Can you explain a little bit as to why that's necessary for virtual instruments?
Yeah, and I'll also explain how to implement it as well. I think with this negative track delay thing, the idea, okay, is that when you get a big orchestra in a room and you start recording these different articulations, when somebody blows into an instrument or starts to bow their cello, the violin, the viola, there's that short period of time for the sound to then start resonating.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a sound that we hear and we recognize as being the instrument sound. And with this, there's a slight delay. And what happens is an instrumentalist, be it a cellist or a horn player, they will typically, as a rule of thumb, knowing the meter of the song, play slightly ahead of the beat to compensate for the fact that they've got to blow into their instrument or bow the instrument. And when these are recorded, well, this can't be taken into consideration because it's recorded as a sample or a set of samples. So what negative track delay essentially does is it plays the role of bringing that sound slightly ahead of the beat, as if the real person that was playing the instrument would have intended to. Now, with shorter notes, like spiccatos, as we mentioned, these very short rhythmic notes, these are going to be very, very short delays because they're actually very immediate when they play. So the distance between when you would hear the sound and when they start playing the instrument would be very short. And we're only talking about milliseconds here. So for a spiccato note, it might be as short as 15 or even 25 milliseconds. And for that, in Studio One, all you would do for those short notes is you would press F4 to open up the inspector. About 2/3 of the way down, you'll see a little area that you can actually adjust the negative track delay, and you would put the figure in that's most appropriate for the sound. Now, if it's a long note, like a sustained, bassoon note or something like that, the time to get the sound, to its most resonant would be maybe around about -50 milliseconds. It takes a little bit longer. And then with a very soft, romantic legato note, it might take as long as 180 milliseconds. So you would put in minus 180 milliseconds, and knowing what these values are will help you produce not only better sounding, more realistic sounding mock-ups, but it will enable you to combine and layer different libraries with each other.
Right.
A good example of that might be that you're using a symphonic orchestra library. You've got your first, second violins, you've got your violas, your cello, and your bass. But you just need to add a little bit of definition for the short passages like spiccatos. And for that, you might want to use a small chamber library and layer that on top of the symphonic so that it's got a bit more bite.
Oh, right, cool. Yeah.
And actually applying these negative track delays appropriately for each of the articulations will enable you then to essentially line them up more accurately. And you'll hear this if you were to take 2 libraries and not apply any negative track delay, and you'll hear that it sounds a little bit washy. It feels like some of the energy is taken away. And in some cases, if you've got percussion, it'll actually sound blatantly out of time.
So essentially, we're talking about like the onset of sound. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And
So,
using those values to kind of move everything so that the onsets are all lining up and you get a much stronger transient, a much stronger peak sound.
exactly. Yeah. And this goes back to the point that I made earlier about, having a few things and knowing how to use them very well.
Yeah.
I have a lot of libraries, but I've learned them over the years, and having just two or three that kind of cover a lot of the basic things that you need. Albion One, for example, is a good example, or Abbey Road Studio Orchestra from Spitfire, both good examples of two very versatile libraries. Where they have lots of little add-ons and lots of little things you might want to use that aren't so traditional. And if you were just to figure out what all these negative track delays are for each of the instruments, or for each of the articulations, you could set up a template and you'd never have to think about them ever again.
Yeah. Yeah, templates are so powerful, and I don't think, regardless of the style of music you're working in, I don't think we use them enough, to be honest. And certainly for if you're doing stuff with sound libraries for, for games and films and cues and that kind of thing for TV or whatever, I think those are really, they're really, really important, and they'll save a ton of time when you're setting up for a session.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is, and this is something that you will see if you're ever watching tutorials on how to write, cinematic trailers or anything like that. If you ever look at their piano roll and you notice that they've moved the notes slightly ahead of the beat, it's because they're compensating for the fact that the sound is not in time.
Yep.
So they haven't actually applied the negative track delay. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's a sign of unprofessionalism or not knowing their library very well, but it could be a telltale sign that actually what would be better for them. And I think this goes to the point about why Studio One is so good these days, is that if you need to say, for example, use the score editor, for example, and get that printed off and sent to somebody. Maybe it's just to have an individual who's recording at home, record the lead line of the cello, for example,
Yeah.
because you just need to add a little bit of, organic sound to it. If you send that to them and you've moved the notes to compensate for the fact that they're not in time, guess what?
It's going to be impossible to read.
No one's going to be able. It's going to have all sorts of rests and things like that. And if they're very proficient at reading, then yeah, they might get an understanding that it's not where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it's just write to the grid, man. Make your life easier.
Yeah. That's good. That's very, very good stuff. So, for getting started in writing for, some of the places you've talked about where, you're sending music off to libraries, for example, what would be your best advice for doing that and getting started in doing that?
Yeah. So I think if you're looking at getting any music published anywhere, I think the first thing to do is to create lots of music before you even consider it. Make sure that you're comfortable with, writing music quickly. If you're not the type of person that wants to write quickly, and you want to sort of, I don't want to really use this, the term take a backseat, but you want to take a more relaxed approach to writing music, maybe because you've got a day job and you've got kids and that sort of stuff. The reality is that it's not going to be as lucrative for you, but it is doable. But what I wouldn't sort of encourage is sending your music continuously to people that aren't paying you for your hard work.
Yeah.
I do see it a lot where people are sending their music out endlessly, and getting nothing out of it. And I feel bad for these people. I would like to see people actually spend more time on developing their sound.
Yeah.
And like finding out, what's the thing that I'm really good at? Am I really good at doing action stuff? Am I good at doing drama stuff? Am I good at doing hybrid trailers? Am I good at doing, 8-bit music or whatever it happens to be? Then get even better at that and make this music your show reel, right?
Mm.
If you've got no video to go with it, although that can be useful, make sure that you do have some sort of visual presence. So, a website online.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rely on, necessarily these sort of free web pages that I see about. It's not necessarily super professional, and it's often really obvious because as a result of them being free, people are often either advertising on your website and probably earning more money than you are, and you're going to see usually a site provided by whatever the website happens to be called, and it's not really super professional. But make sure you've got at least say 10 songs that you think are worthy of the genre that you are hoping to break into, and keep your eyes and ears open at all times for any opportunity in regards to whether that's just helping somebody out with something, a small thing. Like I'm not suggesting, and this is would be a huge breach of any terms of use and service regarding libraries. But if somebody needs to have a piece of their music have strings applied to it, or that sort of thing, if you're in a position to do that, offer it as a service to somebody. Now, whether they can pay you or not is a different matter. If they can't pay you, what can they offer you?
Yeah.
You won't necessarily, and you won't always, certainly in the early days, be paid for what you do. It's pretty thankless.
It's just like getting started in mixing. Same kind of principle.
Yeah. Or I mean, in anything really, maybe you work at McDonald's or something. No one cares that you work there. You're just a person serving burgers. But, but the person that's ordering the burger doesn't know that you're, the fastest operating, the guy that turns up on time, doesn't know that you're the best employee that they've probably ever had. You're just a guy ordering burgers, right? But that's what you want to be. You want to be the guy that's, turns up on time. He's able to communicate properly. He's willing to kind of, go the extra mile, but also not to forget your family, your dog, your cat. The fact that you put a pizza in the oven 20 minutes ago and it needs to come out,
I've done that.
It does happen. And I think, it's very easy to get bogged down in, a lot of the detail. In actual fact, what you should be doing is keeping it simple, But yeah, don't try to throw as much limelight on yourself as absolutely possible. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to do it, there's no point being blasé about it, right?
For sure.
And I'm not expecting everybody to, jump out going, "Hey, I'm a superstar. Look at me," with the sparkly shirt on or anything like that. But what I'm saying is get yourself an online presence, show people what you can do. And certainly if you can do any, videos on here's how I compose this piece, or, maybe you've got a local musician that you work with or would like to work with, ask them, maybe get to interview them, maybe record some of the time that you spent recording a piece of music with them, and create a little bit of buzz about yourself and what you can do and how you work with other people. Because ultimately, if you're really rotten to work with,
yeah, doesn't matter how good your skills are.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people that get away with that, but
True.
but ultimately, if you're an amenable person, you can be gotten on with pretty well, and you're able to look after yourself as well. I mean, it's for the most part, it's pretty thankless. Like working in McDonald's, no one cares that you're the guy that turns up on time, and that you can make the burgers quicker than everybody else. But ultimately, the time that you have free, go and take a walk. If you've got a dog, walk the dog. Don't forget to do that. Go and see your family. Sit down with them in the evening. It's very easy to fall into the trap of constantly sitting and writing and doing, and you think you're being productive.
Yeah.
But you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. If you feel that you need to be doing something that's productive, and I think many people that know me are aware of probably what I'm about to say, and that's, take an hour or so, whether it's per week, per day, whatever you can afford, and use this time to learn what you've got, and use that time to basically make weird stuff that you wouldn't normally make.
Yeah.
Play around with your synthesizers and, create a new sound, a sound that nobody else has got, make something unique. And do this with the view to not producing anything, meaningful. You're doing it really just from the perspective of, it comes across, a lot of people might see it as procrastinating from the outside, right?
Yeah.
But that hour that you have, that's kind of your playtime, right? That's your playtime where there are no rules. You can do what you want to do. And you will be surprised. Within about 6 months, you'll learn things, and, without watching YouTube videos, without listening to other people, you will learn so much more in that 6 months than you would have done trying too hard.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to become a slave to your art and a slave to creativity, to the point where, everything else is kind of sacrificed or put aside for the sake of it. That's probably, in my experience, the slowest way to develop your career in the music business.
I've just noticed a comment there by Peter Brooks, about writer's block.
Yes,
and I have some thoughts on that, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which goes back to what I was saying about going out and taking a walk. Everybody deals with writer's block in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to get this message across about writer's block, especially when you get writer's block. I know that I used to think this way, and I'm sure most people do as well, is, I can't get the ideas out. I'm at my wit's end. When's it going to come back? And you try to force it, and you try to force it, and it just doesn't come. It doesn't come by forcing it. Think of it as this. When you can't come up with an idea that you think satisfactory, it simply means that your standards have risen.
Correct.
So treat it as a positive rather than a negative. And then swiftly go to the pub.
Yes.
go to the pub, have a beer, go and see your mates, go for a drive, take the dog for a walk. And just by disconnecting, it will come back to you, unforced. It's like, hiccups, right? You try to get rid of hiccups, and there's every wives' tale under the sun about how to get rid of hiccups.
Yep.
And usually when you stop thinking about it, they just go, and you forgot when they disappeared. They just go.
Yeah.
So take that walk and do something else, Go and take the pizza out of the oven. It's been in 20 minutes already,
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. Particularly, when you're talking about removing yourself from it and trying not to force it. And I think you're absolutely right. I think your interpretation of what writer's block is and isn't is really, really important. Like you say, you can see it from one point of view or another. You can see it from a positive light, or you can see it from the negative light, i.e., I can't get anything done. I can't get anything good to come, which is how most people portray writer's block. As a composer, an arranger, and a songwriter as well. I used to do exactly that. That was my point of view with it for a long time, was, and all that does is just reinforce, that just digs you in deeper into the negativity of it. And so you try, like you say, you try flogging the dead horse, which is never going to work. And it took me the longest time to learn what you were just talking about, which is what's happened is you've progressed. You've grown past a certain point. A lot of people talk about you hit a wall that you just can't get over, an obstacle that you just can't get over. And the reason is because you've actually moved forward. You've developed. And it's because of that, everything you are doing now pales in comparison to the new ideas that you have beginning to develop in your mind. You're already thinking about new ideas. You're already thinking about a sound. You just maybe can't play it yet.
Yeah. Even if somebody, in the chat, for example, has only been involved in writing music or doing anything musical with Studio One, maybe for the last couple of years, I guarantee today you are better than you were when you first started using it. And your then self would be really impressed with what you can do now, 2 years later.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole thing. This is where I think it all links into writer's block, is that, we inherently get better at the things that we enjoy, and we continue to practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even think of it as kind of a block anymore. And I think the kind of separating yourself out, taking time out from what you're doing is excellent advice. And on the back of that, I would also say remove the pressure from yourself. Taking yourself away from it is one way to do that. But when you do go back into your studio or your composing room, or you're sat back at the piano, if that's where you do your composing, remove the pressure from yourself and just play. Improvise. Just sit and go, okay, there are no rules, there are no guidelines, there's no brief, there's no cue sheets. I'm just opening up a session in Studio One. I'm creating an audio track or a virtual instrument track, and I'm just going to play and see what comes out in the next 30 minutes of playing. And it's another way in which you can find yourself getting out of that block. For me, it's improvising. It's, taking myself out from it is great when I start to get frustrated. That the thing that I can hear in my head, I can't make come out of my fingers at the piano. Because I just can't play what I can hear. And so that's when I need to go take a walk. Or that's where I need to go to the pub, or go spend time with my wife and kids. And then I can come back. And when I come back, The first thing I do is I just play. I play things I know I can play and things that I enjoy to play. And that relaxes me and that relaxes my mind. And then I can start kind of just improvising and searching for that thing that's in my head. And eventually it will come. Eventually I will find the thing that I am hearing come out of the piano and come out of the speakers, and all of a sudden it's the most exciting thing when that happens, when you have that breakthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so a big middle finger to to writer's block, because I don't believe in such a thing. It's a terrible word for it. It's a terrible word.
It's really negative and
Um,
not helpful.
yeah, absolutely. I've got writer's block. No, you don't. You just think you're better now, and you probably are. So go and take a walk and come back to it when the idea springs to you, and then you'll be
Yep.
fine. You know.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
And don't use it as an excuse not to go create.
yeah, and also don't use it as an excuse to go and buy another bloody library, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Have you
Uh,
empirically tested this theory?
yeah. um, yeah. On the topic of libraries and sounds and all the things that we use, we covered libraries from the perspective of maybe strings, brass, and winds and stuff, but obviously there's things like guitars and synths and
Yeah.
all that stuff, and with writing for media, whether that's for games, for movies, whatever it happens to be, it's not all classical guides. It's not. Um, you know, I think we touched earlier on Doom, for example. It's all really heavily based around rock and metal music.
Yep.
And I don't know if anyone, is that interested, but what was released, I think this week, was the Forbes, list for, people that basically were paid the most in the entertainment industry. And Genesis was top.
Ah, wow. Yeah.
It was something like $280 million earned in 2022. So there
Yeah.
is still a place for sort of rock music and that sort of stuff, and even the Rolling Stones were up there in around about fourth place.
Wow, crikey.
So if you're the type of person that actually likes to produce rock music and stuff like that, and you haven't really thought about doing anything with it, maybe it's just up on SoundCloud because you thought, oh, it'd be good for my mates to listen to or whatever. Um, you know, Revisit it and see if there's anything you can do with it. Maybe give it a bit of a remix, or maybe throw some other instruments in there that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of. Maybe listen to some cues. And when I say the word cue, by the way, folks, it's sort of the format of music that music supervisors use
Yeah.
for your television commercials, your trailers, that sort of stuff. So it'll usually have like an intro that's very simple. If anyone's heard a movie trailer in the last 10 years, they would have heard that ominous, uh, D5 note played, just a bing, at the beginning of the movie. So it starts off relatively simple. Then there's an introduction section. Then there's the sort of like, the antagonist section, if there's a baddie in the film or something like that. Then there's obviously the big climax, with all the big drums and the triplets and all the rest of it. But it doesn't have to be that.
Mm-hmm.
I would always recommend going to one particular website in particular. It's called audiomachine.com.
Cool.
They have a public library that you can go and look and you can listen to them. When you play the music, it will show you a waveform. You'll hear the music. Pay attention to the shape of the waveform. You'll be able to easily pick out the A section, the B section, the C section, the D section. Go into Studio One set up some markers.
Yep.
Now all you need to do is write a little bit of music in that little section. Move on to the next bit, write a little bit of music there. Borrow some ideas from that, develop it, and move it into the next section. And you could actually take existing music that you've already got and do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
You're just reformatting the traditional song structure into a way that's useful for sound, supervisors and editors. And this is the stuff that they want to buy.
Yeah.
Well edited, well performed, sonically pleasing, easily editable from their perspective. And I think everybody should at least give it a go once, because you'd be surprised. A lot of people just fall in love with the fact that there are rules to follow, and it's quite nice sometimes to know that you've got some railroad tracks that you can just set your cart on and go.
Yeah, it's good discipline as well, and it helps prove to yourself that you can still be creative, but within certain guidelines and within certain limitations. And actually, limitations, I've talked about this a lot on this show with Jonny in the past. We've talked a lot about being creative within limitations and using limitations to generate creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these sorts of cues, as we call them, short pieces of music, they're generally only 1 to 2 minutes worth of music. They're pretty short, so you're restricted in that sense.
Yep.
But also, when it comes to making these pieces of music, whether you're taking existing stuff that you've already got and editing it to fit the pattern, you've also got this limitation in the fact that maybe you only need to do 4 bars at the beginning and there's not very much going on there.
Yeah.
What do you put there? What sonic textures do you put there? Has it got that ubiquitous piano ping at the beginning? Does it need that? Does it need to have strings in? Does it need to have guitars? Does it need to have drums? You've got all these little sections and you just build it. I can't remember who said this, but they basically said 1 bar at a time. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? Yes, you've got to zoom out and kind of see the end product.
Yeah.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, you can only write, 1 bar at a time.
Exactly.
And I see a lot of people do this in tutorials, and there's nothing wrong with it, by the way. They'll be like, "Oh, I've recorded this awesome guitar bit. Copy paste, copy paste, copy paste." Well, that's my middle 8 section sorted out.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you go and listen to professionally done trailer cues and that sort of thing, you will hear a certain amount of repetition, but there's a certain amount of change happening that makes you it keeps things interesting.
Got to keep the listener's ear engaged.
Yeah, especially when the music's generally seen as quite simple.
Yeah.
The chords don't stray around too much. It's all very kind of block chords, very closely knit to each other.
Yeah.
The melody's usually pretty simple, designed to be simple from the perspective of being catchy, or not being ambiguous. Yeah, I'd encourage everybody to at least give it a go. There are no rules. Certainly, if you've never done it before, I mean, you can essentially do what you want. But what I would do is I'd look at something that already exists, and again, audiomachine.com would be a great place to at least explore what's available. And for the purpose of YouTube and all the rest of it, I'm not sponsored by them, and neither is Jonny, but they are probably one of the best libraries in the world, and are featured on more films than probably anybody.
Yeah, sound advice. I mean, learning from what other people have done helps helps you provide helps you create a blueprint for what you want to do. I mean, up on my shelf up here, I've got the James Horner Aliens score,
Yeah, wonderful.
which is one of the best film scores just ever. And James Horner was a brilliant composer, very adept at blending um, real orchestral instruments with synthesizers and wordless vocal sounds, which he did brilliantly in Apollo 13. But in
Yeah.
Alien, there's just so much going on in that score. One of the things I because that actually came from my colleague Chris Swaffer, because he has like loads of film score, full score books. One of which is The Matrix, which I want to get my hands on. So once I've finished with Alien, I'm
Yeah.
going through that and learning as much as I can about Horner's orchestration from that. I'm going to go and look at Don Davis's
Yeah,
score for The Matrix.
the chord that made the theme.
Oh, God, dear. French
Yeah,
horns, trumpets, French horns, trumpets. It's perfect.
yeah, it's brilliant. And yeah, game over, man. Game over.
Exactly. I
Uh,
mean, you know,
Mike's put a question in there from Music to Motion. There, he's put in a
yep.
question about can you explain more about how a lot of trailer tunes have three parts, aside from changing every 4 to 8 bars per part, and also talk about the edit points, etc. Yeah, it's a good point. So you'll see this if you take a look at some examples of trailer music, or even just listen to a trailer, on YouTube or something like that.
Yep.
So they're pretty popular these days. A lot of people like to watch them. So you'll have the intro. It's all starts off almost as an introduction. There's not much going on, and there's the introduction of the characters or the theme, right? And that's usually the first point where you'll hear the sort of the theme melody, you know.
Yep.
And at each end of these sections, there's always that almost like a holding your breath. There's a pause at the end of each of these sections, so it's like a, and then it comes back, you know.
Yep.
And it's all suspense driven, right?
Yeah.
It's all there to create suspense. Everyone's heard the boom, the big
Yeah.
downers, these big sort of basses that come down, and it's all really designed to, build suspense as the next part's coming. It's not quite there yet, but oh, there it is, bang, Now I'm excited, and with these sort of with these sections, these sort of edit points, it also has the added advantage of the editor or the supervisor being able to determine whether it's going to fit into the trailer or not, but also to edit it to a point. So, and again, this goes back to making sure that your negative track delays are set correctly, because if an editor needs to cut your music, maybe they don't really want that very beginning bit that's not really got much going on, and they just want to go full balls into the balls to the wall with the trailer and just go epic from the get-go. They might want to edit it from that point, so that'll cut it, and it's got to work immediately with no further editing at all from that cue point, that sort of kicking off point for the next section, and it's got to work. But the same applies to the end of that section, which is why you have these little sort of pauses in between. They might want to cut off the end. Maybe they don't need the whole epic bit at the end because it's a different type of trailer. You have your full length trailers. You always have the sort of the intro one that does the almost like a teaser. It's like almost like a 5-second thing. The logo will pop up and it'll disappear, and everybody like, oh, they're making another version of that movie. Awesome. And it goes viral. And everyone's waiting for the full trailer. So all these little sections are important for lots of different reasons, and those are just a few of the reasons. But when you're creating these, and when you look at some of the examples on audiomachine.com that I've mentioned, you will see these little gaps. You'll see these spaces in the music, and it just as single pieces of music, they will just add suspense automatically. But they also have an alternate purpose as well, so that they can be edited correctly for the video that they might be representing.
That's great stuff, Rich. That's really great. All right, we are 3 minutes past 1 in the morning here in the UK, so it's probably past Rich's bedtime. I don't know. Although Rich, I don't think you ever sleep, so maybe we're early doors yet. It's not. I don't really sleep either, so we could probably go on for another 2 or 3 hours, but it's a Sunday night, and we want to let these good folks get to their families and stuff. And Mike, I don't know if he is planning to do an after show Zoom like we would normally do on a Wednesday or a Sunday. But Mike, if you are planning on doing one, then please do put your Zoom link in the chat. And that would be great if you're up for doing that, and we can talk a bit more about tonight's subjects. Rich, thank you very, very much for your time and for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. You'll notice, folks, that Rich is now known as Studio One Tuts. So I'm assuming that therefore there is a new presence website, perhaps.
Yeah. So, and it will be coming soon. I know that there's been a lot of umming and ahhing over things the last sort of 12 months, but yeah, studio1tuts.com will be coming soon. I will keep people informed and updated. I will spread the word pretty wide and far.
Cool.
There will be some collaboration involvement with this as well. So your good self, Jonny, will have some of his videos on there, basically showing people how to do things like, for example, use the note effects and and chord voicings, and all the cool videos that Jonny's done over the years will be featured on this website. But essentially, what it's going to be is it's going to be a hub where all of the information that you might be looking for regarding Studio One will be in one place. We'll be having some videos from Producing in the Box, Andrew Barr. There'll be videos from myself. There'll be videos from Lucas Rashidska as well. And myself and Lucas will be working on some things in the background regarding Studio One Toolbox as well.
Cool.
So, and eventually, and this will be dependent on demand, we'll open up a Studio One university, which will potentially, and we have the ability to do it already, but to produce courses that you can take, and we'll also have the possibility in the future of even doing live video courses.
Wow.
There's all sorts of cool stuff that we can do with this site. It's just dependent on how things go. So we'll start off nice and smoothly. We won't try to bite off more than we can chew. But there's a lot we can do with it, and it's all ready to rock and roll.
That's fantastic, Rich. I'm really excited about what you have going on, and the website in development, and the plans you've got, and delighted to be involved with what you're doing. So as soon as that site is launched, folks, get yourselves over there and check out the content that
they will know about it. I will pay sufficiently for Facebook and Twitter advertising, so there'll be no way that you don't know about it.
Absolutely. So I presume you'll do some kind of launch party and everything to go with that.
Maybe something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Guinness maybe a required level of Guinness may be involved, and if wine's your thing, then
Required level of Guinness and maybe a secretary or two.
Indeed.
All right, folks. I don't see if Mike has a link to his Zoom or anything like that. But if he's gonna do one, that would be great. If not, that's also cool. We can go about our day doing something else.
Himself or Billy, either or.
Yeah, himself or Billy. Yeah, after show parties are always good. And we can talk more about this because I'm sure Rich has a wealth of information on this subject. So,
we've skimmed the surface a little bit, but hopefully it gives people a bit of an insight.
Gives people an insight and kind of some advice on getting started, which is cool. And I'm sure we can kind of revisit this and talk more about this in a little bit more depth if people want that, if people would like that.
I would like that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We should definitely talk more. And maybe, get some other composers and involved, and we could have, more of a kind of composer symposium kind of thing, maybe, where we can just talk about composing in general and songwriting in broad terms as well. Could be cool. But otherwise, folks, we are going to say a very good night, everybody. Thanks a lot, Rich, for your time and for your wit and wisdom on this fantastic subject. I've learned loads, and I'm sure a bunch of people here have learned a lot as well. Mike was saying that particularly a lot of what we were talking about is very useful to him, so that's great. But otherwise, folks, we will see you on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. But other than that, have a great rest of your week. Take care. Good night.
Stay funky fresh. Salut.
Yeah.
Still going. I need to go for a wee again.